All right. So thank you for joining us today. I am going to be your lead in this presentation, and then the next hour, Jackie will lead us. So we're just team tagging you guys. This is us. I'm Nora Rackley, like Katie said. I am a reference instruction librarian and OER librarian at Lake-Sumter State College at the Leesburg campus, and I've been here for 25 years. And I am very pleased to talk to you about crafting research assignments today. Jackie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing, Nora. I like the adjective fabulous, so I will say I hope everyone else is feeling fabulous today as well. I've been at Lake-Sumter since 2006, and I am an assistant professor in the English department. So of course, I do an awful lot of teaching of research. So this is how Nora and I have gotten to be such a fabulous team over the last how many ever years it has been since I got here.
All right. So does everybody see my slide? I was trying to monitor chat and that didn't work.
I will
Okay.
help you monitor the chat, Nora.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to talk today about research assignments, starting with the idea to figuring out exactly where you want to focus the assignment and what the assignment's purpose is. And then we're going to talk about collaborations and reviewing, revising, revisiting, refining assignments, because it's an ongoing continuous cycle of you give a student an assignment, they do it, you get it back, you didn't get what you wanted, so you revise it, and then you do it all over again, right? So that's where we're going to start today. Let's talk about the idea first. A lot of times when you're trying to develop a project, you start thinking about what it is you want the students to learn and how you can get that done. How can you achieve that outcome? Many times you have an idea for an assignment, but you're not sure what the final product is. Sometimes I'll see something on the internet or around the library or wherever, and it gives me an idea. Oh, how cool would that be if the students did that? Jackie starts with the idea of the final finished product and then works kind of backwards to figure out how to achieve that idea, right? So there are whole ways of doing this that can be different for us in all the different our different fields. Collaborating with each other, creating assignment directions that are cohesive and explicit will help everyone to help your students, and it will help the students ultimately succeed. So let's look at a case study. The assignment that I have taken and kind of broken up is one that we had trouble with years and years ago. We don't even do this assignment anymore. But the assignment eventually evolved once we figured out what it was the teacher wanted and how we could most likely achieve that assignment in a better way for students. So here we go. I give you guys about 5 minutes. The instructions for the assignment are on the left, and the rubric is on the right. I made this purposefully bad. Okay. I know you would never do a rubric like this. So let's just think about it for a minute, review it, and then we'll get back together.
Nora, we have our first great comment. Pat Dunn says the length requirements are extremely vague. Good catch. Yes, by all means, everybody go ahead and feel free to put in your concerns and issues into the chat. The rubric is too vague. Part 1 is also very vague. I think that's a great point Julia made, especially not giving specific journals or even a specific database to look at. One of my favorite questions in the chat was, what is correct? Because I totally agree with that. Article is correct. Article is not correct. I think the no article one's easy, but the rest of them are a little bit tricky. And Matt Kennedy, our own Matt Kennedy asks, so they have to find an article that mentions another article.
And my question is to you, how would you do that? What would you find first?
Yes, put yourselves into the learner's position for a moment. And if this was given to you in handout form, how would you approach it if you had no choice? Because
luckily this one isn't live and this one isn't real, so your grade isn't depending on it. Exactly. Right?
So one person mentioned would do the popular one first, the popular press first. Misha mentioned she would actually do the part 1 first and do the peer-reviewed article first. We have some agreement with both. So we're kind of split, it looks like, in the chat. Yeah. Some of us would go peer review first. Some of us would go popular first. And of course, that may have something to do with our own experiences in research. From a student's perspective, good question by Jenny. For a student, unless it's been established, the question is, what's a peer-reviewed journal? Right? We would hope you'd given them some advanced warning about
some guidance, right?
If this is the only direction, we wouldn't know. Everybody's mentioning more specifics.
Watching very closely. Our coverage will be both of these joint sessions, and we'll be going.
Yes.
So yeah, this is, as I said, a real assignment. And when it was first distributed to students, it was one of those where the student walks into the library and the librarians in this group will recognize this. The student walks into the library and they say, I have to do this. And we're like, okay, how do we do that?
Yeah, so Nora, point out real quick, Karen has what I think is a really excellent point here. And just the ability to even find, she says it's not likely that something in the popular press would mention a specific article in a peer-reviewed journal, which I think is a great point, that it may not even be possible to do this particular assignment.
Now it is, we learned, we learned the hard way that it is, but you always have, what we learned was we had to do part 2 first. We could do part 1 first, but then trying to find that article was very, very difficult. And a lot of times, I mean, they're not, it's a newspaper, it's a magazine. They're not going to give you a citation for the article that they're referring to. It's going to say something like, a study published in Thursday's New England Journal of Medicine states that blah, 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 right? So you're not going to get a complete reference to that article. So finding the peer-reviewed article in a popular press article afterward, doing part 1 first, makes it really hard to find that first reference, that secondary source in part 2. So we discovered that Newsbank, our newspaper database, has some really good search options. And we ended up creating some great tools for the students to use to do this. And I'll show you those in a little bit. But we had them put it in Newsbank, like the topic. So it was about any topic in psychology. So we say, I don't know, schizophrenia. And so we put schizophrenia in as a topic. We do study and journal. We limit to the dates. It was only supposed to be 5 years. And notice how none of this is in here. There are no specifics in here on purpose, right? So students get very confused because they don't know the process. And one of the things we have to think through is, okay, if this is what we want to accomplish with our students, how do we do that, right? How can we more easily communicate what we want to our students, right? So what are there other comments about things that we can do differently here, Jackie?
Everybody is agreeing that starting with part 2 makes the most sense. There are questions about, again, just how to be more specific, how to use the databases, defining peer review, why is the student doing this assignment, which is an excellent question by our own Patrick Rader, who of course we expect excellent questions from. The purpose being the key to improving not only the assignment, but also to help the students understand why they're doing something, which we all know they do want to know. They would like
Right.
to know why.
What's the point, right?
Right.
What's the point? Why am I doing this? Yeah. So the point really at the start of this was to get the students used to peer-reviewed type of research as opposed to media, and to see the difference, right? So finally, after years of doing it this way, after developing 3, 4, 5 different types of tools for the students to do better, we sort of abandoned all that and asked the instructor, what do you want them to learn? So these complicated searches that they have to do in order to find a secondary source and then find a primary source is not research that a student is ever going to have to do ever in their lives. So what we decided ultimately, so I'm skipping to the end here, is that we gave them pairs of articles. We found for them 5, 10, I don't remember exactly how many we did, pairs of articles that they could choose from to do their stuff from. And then, so we eliminated the problem in the beginning. We just eliminated the whole searching thing because that wasn't necessary for what the student wanted to learn there. So that helped a whole lot with this assignment. Eventually the assignment, the faculty member who started this assignment left for another college, and we really have kind of eliminated it altogether. We don't do this anymore, but we still have all the materials because we created a lot of things for this. So let's move on. Okay. So we just talked about the desired outcomes. What's the purpose? What do you want students to learn? And answering that question is the number one priority here, right? We want to make sure that we're very specific, give guidelines, explicit directions, and be clear about what we want to see and what the final outcome needs to be. We need to eliminate any unnecessary information, anything that the student doesn't have to do, like that whole search for that article, right? So we need to make sure that we're just getting down to the nitty gritty, and we don't want to simplify it to the point where it's meaningless, but we want to make sure that if it's difficult for a reason and not just because, right? So Jackie, did you have specific input in this section?
I just wanted to point out that a good number of our panelists have made an excellent point, which is about the outcomes and the fact that as it was written, there are no outcomes as far as actually creating measurable student learning outcomes for an assignment, which of course we have all obviously across the state and the nation been trained to do. So I think that that was a great one. Another point that someone made, Michelle Rizzo says, I suggest faculty do their own assignment so they can see the gaps in the directions. And of course, you were mentioning earlier, that's one of the reasons why I tend to create my own samples and do them sometimes before I even write the actual assignment, because then I know for sure what I want it to look like. And so that helps me create those outcomes and specific guidelines and explicit directions.
Yes, definitely. Michelle Rizzo, that is something I tell faculty all the time. Do your own assignment. If you can't complete it, the student won't be able to, right? And give it to a librarian or give it to a peer, give it to somebody else and ask them to complete it. I don't know if she's in the audience today, but Mary Heikkinen and I were sharing a course and she was able to see my assignments and she came back to me with an email that said, I don't understand this. How So we ended up revising it together in order so that it would be clearer to both of us and to the students. So you can only make things better by collaborating with your peers, with other instructors, and with librarians. So I think that is the big theme of the day. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. All right. So once the assignment is created, once the assignment has been put on paper, reviewing it, making sure that the instructions are clear, making sure that the instructions are clear to others and not just in your head, it makes it much, much easier to kind of evaluate that assignment. So we review it, we put it out there for the students to do. We revise the things that we need to revise before it's released to the student world. And then it comes back and we revisit it, redo it, and go again, right? We just continuously improve those assignments. In the session we were in earlier for MLA, Kristen Chansey was talking about how she constantly is revising assignments and evaluating what the students did not understand or what they missed. And that's always a very important part of that. A lot of times it happened with rubrics, right? It can happen with, we decided that our rubric was going to be very short, but then we're noticing it needs to be a little bit longer because students are not quite at the top, but not quite in the middle either. They're in the middle. So it becomes a constant revision track. Jackie, I believe you have an example of this.
Yeah, I have a lot of examples from my real life of this. One happened literally just last semester. I was fortunate enough to be teaching our honors students in Lit 2000, which is our Introduction to Literature course. And it was kind of in tandem with our own amazing Jeremy Norton's political science class. And so all of the readings had sort of a political side to them, even in the literature class, there's kind of some crossover. And so we did a whole unit on the civil rights movement, of course, and Southern literature and African-American literature are two of my pet projects anyway. So of course I was all excited about this. And as I was creating the assignment at the end of that module, I called it the BLM presentations for Black Lives Matter, because I wanted the students to look at what's going on in our current life and think about how the history connects, right? But every single one of them, unbeknownst to me, luckily they told Jeremy Norton about this, said, oh my gosh, but I don't want to write about Black Lives Matter. I don't want to do a presentation about Black Lives Matter. I'm tired of hearing about Black Lives Matter. I don't want to deal with it. And so it was a misunderstanding. I didn't necessarily need them to focus on the BLM movement, although that was kind of just shorthand for me. So it was something as simple as I needed to change the title of the assignment. Something that minor made all the difference in the world. And of course, luckily we had live sessions so I could explain this to them in Zoom land. So, you know, I was able to head off the, the crisis during that semester, but certainly when I use that assignment again, I've already done the revision. It's called something completely different. The instructions are more explicit about the fact that you can choose any civil rights issue that is current in our culture. So that constant review, even though that makes things a lot more difficult, is something that just absolutely needs to happen for good quality assignments.
Right. I finally was able to open the chat, and I'm seeing very great conversations here about providing examples. And this is something we touched on, and we're going to touch on a little deeper in the next session. But one of the things I want to say about samples and about instructions is that the clearer the instructions are, the easier it is for librarians and tutors to help your students. Because even if your students don't read the samples, even if they don't look at the samples, we will. So when the student comes to us incredibly confused and they say, I don't know what to do, we make them go into their Canvas course and pull up the assignment. We make them pull up the examples so that we can then teach them from that. And that helps a whole lot. So always provide examples for your students, provide the actual assignments. And if you're in a face-to-face class and you just give them a handout, that's great, but they lose those. So also put them in Canvas, because it's not really for them, it's for us. You know?
Nora, I want to raise a point that Julia Bordeaux mentions, because I think this is great, especially with this continuous improvement cycle. She said, I've even asked students at the end of doing an assignment how it went, particularly if it's the first time I've ever done it. And I wholeheartedly applaud that level of feedback. That's something that I do regularly, because of course I can't count on them to do it in their course evaluations. So I will ask them very specific questions about those particular assignments. So thanks for bringing that up, Julia, because that is a really, really good point.
Yes. I'm seeing a lot of feedback here, and I think most of you who are here may want to join us for the next presentation as well, because that's where we're going to be going over a lot of the things about how to really craft assignments and how to basically teach the students about your discipline and discipline literacy, in addition to information literacy. So we'll go on here. All right. We just talked about how we can collaborate with librarians, brainstorm with other faculty, try the assignment ourselves, make sure that we can do it before the student can. And a lot of this helps us to refine our assignments and have a very polished product before it gets to the students. We often are in a rush to get courses together and stuff. I think it's always really important to look at the assignments before they're being submitted, just to make sure we didn't miss anything, you know, to make sure that we've got everything down. A lot of times consulting with a librarian, and I think somebody said this at the plenary session today, it makes it so that we know whether the assignment is possible, because librarians are basically materials experts. You guys are content experts, and librarians know what we have. We know what you can find and what you can't, and how you can find it and how you can. And one of the things that I think it was Peggy Noon mentioned this morning was that it's very simple for a librarian to say, well, if you want them to only use peer-reviewed journals, these topics are not going to help with that. So we need topics that are going to be more conducive to the kind of research that you want. And sometimes having students just pick their own topic out of thin air is not necessarily the way to go. So it just depends on what you want to do, right? So I'm going to share with you the information literacy assignment template that we have developed for the library intervention model and the QEP stuff. And let me show you. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen now. And I'm going to go to all right, so let's look at the QEP assignment template. Can everybody see my Word file here?
Yes, it came up, Nora.
Okay, awesome. So this is the assignment template that we've created for the QEP. So when an instructor says, okay, we want to create a library intervention model, we want to start a research assignment with our students, this is the template that we're going to use to modify whatever the assignment is. And this walks us through the things to include at each step. So here in italics, it says the section introduces the purpose of the assignment, provides brief background. This is where you would put any information about an assignment that's coming up. So if you've got a scaffolded project where you're having them do maybe an annotated bibliography before they complete their paper, this is where you would say, this annotated bibliography will lead to a research paper on that same topic. So this is what the information would be here. Tell them what their final product is going to be, right? Are they producing a paper? Are they producing a PowerPoint presentation? Are they producing a video? What are they doing? What's the deliverable, if you will? So then you would put in some more details as well. List of requirements, including but not limited to page length, number of slides, number of words, required number of sources, citation style, assignment parts. One of the things that I added purposefully to that bad rubric was length, and we never told them how long it would be, right? Never, not even in the rubric does it say, right? But we're judging them on length without telling them how long it needs to be. So again, very non-specific on purpose because I wanted to point these things out. We don't tell them what style of citation they should use. And, you know, they're in a psychology class, so you assume, oh, it's going to be APA, right? But never assume, right? Because you know what happens. So this is stuff that needs to be very explicit, right? And then in the assignment instructions, the section should include specific directions. If there are different parts to the assignment, add them here. So divide your assignment up, provide the directions for each part. And then submission details. What do you need to do to submit this? How are you going to submit this? And then our information literacy outcomes are going to be a little bit separate from the assignment outcomes. So the instructor will be grading the assignment as an instructor will, right? With their outcomes for their course in mind. But we are adding the information literacy outcomes assessment, which are going to be looked at separately by a different team. And we're going to pull out the information literacy rubric requirements, which include using information, evaluating information, citing information, and accessing information, I think. Use it, evaluate it. I don't remember. Anyway, I'm just a librarian. I've been on break for 2 weeks. Give me a break. So we've got all of that stuff that we're going to be doing along with that. And we thought we would put some of the information literacy outcomes assessment in there. Let me show you now a revised assignment. All right, so I took the template and I made it a little bit bigger and added the assignment kind of revise the assignment. Now, this isn't perfect by any means, but at least it has a little bit more information than the other one did, right? So submitting 2 articles, one from a popular press periodical and another from a peer-reviewed journal. Now, one of the things that I had done in that first assignment was I called a popular press periodical a newspaper or a magazine in the first paragraph, and in the second paragraph, I called it a popular press periodical, which is going to confuse students no matter where you go. So being very intentional in your terminology is very important. So if you're going to say it's a popular press periodical, define it, right? We also need to define a peer-reviewed journal, right? So I went ahead and added better instructions here, better overview. I didn't do a rubric because I don't like doing them, even though I do them. I can do bad ones really easily, right? But we have our submission detail and all that information. I specifically said use the library guide for directions on how to complete the assignment, because that assignment as it stands is incredibly complicated. And we created 3-part instructions for how to actually complete this assignment. James created videos. We created how to search a news bank. We have a picture of how to construct the search. So in the lead first paragraph, it should say the topic. In all text, it should say study and journal. In the source should not be journal, because a lot of times what would happen is that they would find the Wall Street Journal or the Journal of the Atlanta Constitution Journal. I don't remember, but there's a lot of newspapers that call themselves journals too. So we made sure that we have a not in the source, the name of the newspaper, word journal, and then a date for the past 2 years. So you see how complicated the search is, and it required a lot of information. So we did provide for them some examples. Here it's got the lead author, published Thursday in the New England Journal of Medicine. And then we said, oh, Thursday, that's July 16th, but it could also be last Thursday, even though it's not. So we need to look for this particular journal. And it just kind of flowed from there. Eventually, we did do it where we eliminated this step altogether and we just gave them the pairs of articles. And that made it so much easier. Jackie, did you want to add anything here?
Yeah, a couple of things that have come up in the chat that I think are relevant here. One is the idea, everybody loves the idea of samples, which I think is still a key. So providing a sample of what that assignment would look like. Several people talked about but topic choices. And of course, this has become a real sticking point for me in many cases, because the older I get, the fewer wide open topic choices I like to lay out there, because I don't know about you, but I'm really tired of reading about certain things. So I do believe, especially if you are teaching at, as most of us are, at the 1 or 2,000 level or the 1 or 200 level, depending on how your school operates, we are not teaching graduate students. We are teaching freshmen and sophomores in college, and especially most of them who have not even had family members who have gone to college before. And so I think that the more specific you can be, give them the topics. Like I think even in that psychology one, if I was revising that, I might suggest, hey, what are these topics that you want them to look at? And give them, Alzheimer's, of course, was mentioned on on that one, postpartum depression, something very, very specific to look for, because that's going to solidify a lot of the issues that come up. The other thing that I was thinking about was we had several people mention putting a why am I doing this type thing in the assignment as well. So you mentioned earlier, if you don't need them to learn how to research, then give them the articles. let them just start with the articles. If you want them to do the searching, then you have to show them how to do the searching. And so James's videos, I know, are always very helpful with that. I do a lot of my own kind of POV videos of myself doing a search, and show them the lovely ands and the nors and the ors and the buts and the all the other lovely Booleans that you librarians get like really, really overly excited about. Nora knows the story, but I had a librarian in St. Louis years ago that I worked with who would spend 2 solid hours talking about Boolean connectors. And so I finally just banned her from my classroom. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can't. There's only so many ands and buts that I can handle in a 2 hours time frame. But and it all comes back to that idea of specific. The more specific you can be, the better chances you are of getting what you're actually really, really wanting, to quote the Spice Girls.
We have other questions. I'm seeing a lot of activity in
How about
the,
opening it up for questions on assignments that maybe you have some questions about? If you've had an assignment recently that didn't go the way you wanted it to, throw that in the chat and we'll kind of workshop some of those. Since this is a workshop, we can do that.
yeah.
We, of course, with 111 participants, which we are super excited about, by the way. So shout out to everybody who has come from, around the world to be here today. But it does make it a lot harder to do breakout sessions or things of that nature because, there's a lot of you, which is not a bad thing. But if you've got an assignment that you've struggled with, or maybe a student has told you about an assignment that they have struggled with as well. One other thing I wanted to mention was the collaboration idea. That was one of the things I mentioned in the collaboration with Jeremy on in our honors program. All of the classes, they are paired up with a completely different discipline. And I can tell you that having somebody who's not even remotely attached to your discipline help plan your classes and your assignments can be super, super helpful. I mean, Jeremy and I have known each other for years and have worked together for years. So, it wasn't like I was dealing with a complete stranger, but sometimes having somebody whose discipline is very different from yours can be really, really interesting. I know that Brenda Scochellis and Amber Carlins, Amber is the director of the honors program, did a crossover between physics and theater, which was fascinating to hear about even for us other professors. So collaborations can be way outside of what you would normally think of, I think is a really good point.
Thinking outside the box is also very, very much fun. A lot of times you want your students to gain some research, some basic research skills, but you're not sure exactly how to accomplish that. And partnering with librarians is really good. I've had an idea for years about taking the Billy Joel song. I believe it's the yes, that one. Taking that song and researching those specific elements that he talks about in that song and finding out more information.
Yeah.
We didn't start the fire. That's it. I knew it was something about fire. But but I've always wanted to get a class to do a project where they're researching where each student is researching an aspect of that song. And maybe that's a really great one to do as a on the fly, very low stakes, let's get in touch with our databases type of assignment where the students just use library databases to research those very specific things.
Jeff Melton mentioned, imagine if he rewrote it today. I think somebody has done that. I think somebody recently put out one, probably find it on YouTube within a couple of seconds. If we were good at Google searching like our students. Actually, very good at Google searching. It's one of my favorite things in the whole wide world.
I've
Because I do an informative essay that I borrowed from Amber on charities. Oh, it's a great one. It is basically a what are they, what do they do, where does the money come from, and where does it go, etc. The issues I have with this assignment are that students don't want to go outside the original website of the charity. Kevin and I go over this in great detail, but about 35% of them just don't get it. Honestly, Christy, I almost, if I were doing that assignment, I would kind of agree with them, because I would say, well, who better to tell me about the organization than the organization, right? So I think this might be a great chance to locate some additional things that you want them to use. This might be a place to add some sources directly. So instead of giving them an open research, you're absolutely right. The bias issue is absolutely, you want outside opinions, but you may have to supply them a reading list for that. I think this would be a great opportunity for that, to say, okay, well, here's somebody else talking about this charity and they are saying really bad things about it, which I know happens, right? So that would be a great example, but asking them to go find that article might be difficult, whereas you and Kevin could have that little bibliography ready to go and to say, here, let's take a look at this. Kind of reminds me of Jeremy Norton, when he was a librarian with us, would do that thing with the white supremacist website that had Martin Luther King's name in the title of it. Students wouldn't necessarily found that on their own, but he could show them that as a great example of something that is not what it seems. So having those things that might be harder for them to find on hand could be really useful in that particular instance, I think.
For that one, I specifically ask my students to cite a source from a specific website. So I know Charity Navigator, Christy, is one of the resources that we've been using for that. And so just if the requirements say, you have to use Charity Navigator for one of the sources, because honestly, the bias, if you're talking about what the charity does, what they do and how they do it, the charity is the best source for that. They tell you how much money they spend. They have to give reports because they're a nonprofit. So there are things that are required by law. And they really have a wonderful coverage of information, right? So if all the information they need is on that site, why use anything else? But if you require something like find reviews of the charity using Charity Navigator, that's going to force them to go to that, right? Yeah, the MLK site has gone away. It no longer exists. It was martinlutherking.org. And it was, what is it, Jeremy, Whitefront or Stormfront? It was Stormfront who was behind it. And they were a white supremacist organization. So yeah, unfortunately it has disappeared.
No, that's probably a good thing.
Probably, but it was a great teaching tool. All right, any other things, any other assignments that you're having trouble with your students?
I'm not necessarily having trouble with the students, but I'd like to share an interesting assignment that I came across, and I've got friends in history that have done it before, is you've wanted to give them a student assignment to help them acquire knowledge and learn life skills. Have them do a resume of a famous person. For example, in history, you may say, develop a resume for Abraham Lincoln. So not only do they have to research the character and find things, they also got to put it into a resume. And then you submit it. Like in business, I've done this before. I have them do a resume of Henry Ford. And then they have to research Henry Ford, get all the information, and then actually create a resume with the information, and then submit it. So that way they're learning a life skill at the same time.
That's a great outside of the box suggestion, Graham. I like that one. Actually, I may steal some of that for my students in our leadership class, because they do a leadership profile of past historical figures, but having them include a resume would be wonderful, especially because it's an SLS class. So how student successy is that? See, that's collaboration. Right here, live on Zoom.
I actually have done something like that with my Foundations of Success class with a, like, I call it a creative resume. But I find that for that class, it doesn't work as well because the students are too much low level and they're not really focusing on specific things. So I might change that, but I have gotten some great ones for like Spider-Man and things like that that were interesting.
My sample presentation for the leadership class is based on a in-depth study of Mayor McCheese from McDonald's. That's my chosen leader. So it's fun to make that stuff up. Other questions? Let's see. Christy mentions ENC 2210 because of course we do teach them resumes in there. That's a great idea. What format do they use for citations? Ingrid, on which assignment? I'm not sure which one that's referring to.
For your resume of a famous person.
Oh yeah, that's
like how did you put in like the citations into a resume format, and like did you just kind of tack it on at the end under like publications or something?
If I were doing it, I'd probably just have them turn in a bibliography with it. But Graham, do you have a specific what they did with the information that they looked up?
Yeah, I just like a bibliography. Just have them do the resume and then attach at the end where they found the information. Yeah.
Okay, so they didn't actually have to cite in-text sources for that.
Well, you can do it that way if you want to, but I just at least want to know the sources they use. So if I want to look up things to make sure they've got it correct, I can do that. Yes.
Excellent.
But you can do it any way you want to. But I have them doing it at the end, not as part of the resume, just put it at the end.
Yeah, that's what I would probably do as well. It makes sense. Other questions? Other assignments that you've struggled with? I know that, I supposedly am really good at this, and every semester I will find that I have written an assignment that does not get what I wanted from it. In fact, Nora and I were there was one last semester that was an absolute disaster, and now I can't find it or remember what was a disaster about it. So Nora and I were trying to put our collective heads together and remember it. Hopefully we'll come up with it once our brain cells get back firing in the regular semester. We'll hope. Keep hope alive for us. But that's part of that continuous improvement thing. And sometimes, it's just a matter of course, it makes sense in our head because we came up with it. And so even something as simple as having somebody else look at it before you launch it can make all the difference in the world. And of course, librarians and other folks in our disciplines are our first line of defense for that, but be creative in how you collaborate. I think that's a really important aspect of what we've been doing at Lake-Sumter lately with crossovers from wildly different disciplines. I think that can be beneficial across the board to think outside of that box.
Other ideas? Anything you've gotten recently that your students didn't do well at? You're very welcome, Michelle. I'm seeing thank you there.
Well, we hope you will join us in 10 minutes in our next presentation. If you love Nora and I, which of course, but we are going to get more into discipline literacy and the idea of how to help students in your particular disciplines. So that's what you have to look forward to over there if you're coming to join us. And if not, of course, you can always view the recorded versions, which is awesome.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for participating.